have been in close contact this week as field work for the audit is wrapping up hopefully by the end of this week. So with that, you do have a slide deck. I'm going to apologize right off the bat. I just noticed that in my haste to get all the wording updated, I never changed the insignia. So it says Salem. It really should say you. So what I'm going to do is go through these slides and just kind of explain the audit process, what the responsibilities are. If there are any questions, please feel free to jump in and ask questions as I go. So the scope of our services, we are providing an audit to express an opinion that covers the financial statements of the district and the extra classroom activity funds. We are also going to provide required communications for the audit, which are internal control findings and required reports on internal control and compliance performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And then at the conclusion of the audit, we will present our reports to the Finance Committee and the board. Our responsibilities are to form an opinion on the financial statements, to say whether they are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. We are responsible to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, and that's whether it's caused by error or fraud. We are responsible to consider internal control over your financial reporting as a basis for us to design our audit procedures, but we are not going to express an opinion on your internal control. And then lastly, we are going to communicate any significant matters related to the audit to the Finance Committee, and that may include the reporting of significant deficiencies, a material weakness, or any type of internal control finding that we identify while performing the audit. So far, so good. Any questions or concerns?
Good on our end, Tom.
Okay. So now the district has responsibilities as well. So that's management's responsibilities, and it's your responsibilities for the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with GAAP. We audit them and express an opinion on those statements, but ultimately the responsibility for the financial statements is the management of the district. Management is also responsible to adopt acceptable accounting policies and maintain appropriate records, to establish and maintain internal control over financial reporting, to identify and ensure compliance with laws and regulations, to make all financial records and related information and personnel available to us as needed for audit purposes, to provide us with a letter at the end of the audit that confirms various representations that were made to us during the performance of fieldwork, and lastly, to adjust the financial statements to correct any material misstatements that we find. The Finance Committee, in addition, has responsibilities to oversee the financial reporting process, to oversee the system of internal control, to evaluate management's process for the identification of fraud risks, and to establish controls to prevent, deter, and detect any fraud, to promote corporate governance and appropriate ethics, and to communicate with us regarding any business and fraud risk concerns. Here's the timetable. So as you know, field work was primarily performed. We normally do a preliminary and a year-end field work. For Fort Edwards, we performed both at the same time. That was actually last week, and it has continued into this week. Our anticipation is to have draft deliverables to you by October 19th, with a presentation to the Finance Committee and the board on October 22nd, with final deliverables within a week of that date. I put by October 29th, but if you give us the go-ahead and we get the rep letter back in a day or so, it will be sooner than that.
Tom, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you said it's going into this week, so do you have a date that it will be completed as far as what you have down there, September 21st to the 25th?
So that date, the 21st to the 25th, was what was scheduled for field work, what we called field work. Obviously, this year, because of COVID, was done remotely. What we normally do have, even when we're in the field, we have wrap-up time that we use to make sure we have all the documentation we need, draft the financial statements, draft the internal control reports, any other communications that are required for the audit. I know Charles has been working on that this week. As I said, we've been in contact to go over a few items. And Charles, jump in if you feel. I believe as of right now, we still feel that we are on pace to have a draft of everything to you by the 19th of October.
I agree with that, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So as of right now, we don't have anything that would suggest to us that we wouldn't be able to meet the 19th, the 22nd, or the 29th dates in that timetable.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. So the next slide, it just talks about the audit approach. As we just, the audit, it's pretty normally broken down into 3 phases: a planning phase, which is generally done before we start the audit, interim field work, and then final field work. And as we mentioned, this year we combined the interim field work and final field work dates. Our approach is to use a risk-based approach designed to focus on identified areas of risk. We make an initial assessment during our preliminary field work, and we update that based upon internal control testing that we do and our preliminary analytical reviews. From there, we develop procedures based upon input from the board and any other observations we make during the audit. And we do use materiality and sampling, which means we are not looking at every single transaction that the district made during the year. Each fund has its own materiality. The entity-wide financial statement also has its own materiality. And we also involve haphazard and statistical sampling to select what items we will test. Our specific areas of focus: cash, we make sure that we have timely reconciliation by fund. Accounts receivable, we're looking to make sure that the receivables are collectible and earned, that revenue is properly recognized, that accounts payable, principally existence and completeness, making sure that we're staying on track with budget ramifications. Our expenditure testing, we do perform internal control testing over cash disbursements and payroll, as well as analytics. And I should also add substantive test procedures over other expenditures. Accrued liabilities, to make sure that they're recorded in the proper fund. We look at reserves for compliance with laws and regulations. Your capital assets, to make sure that we feel that they are accurate and any estimates such as depreciation are reasonable. And lastly, we focus on OPEB and pension accruals, and this affects mostly the district-wide financial statements, but there is a great degree of estimation because we are relying on actuarial reports from 2 different sources to come up with the numbers that are required for both OPEB and pension. Now, just so the board is aware, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the current year standard considerations. There is one, I'm going to have you advance the slide to the next slide. The one I think that's interesting is GASB 84 and the fiduciary activities. So this will be effective for the district a year from now, and they're talking about changing what we do for ECAF. So as what everybody knows, ECAF is a separate component of the audit. There's a cash basis statement. We audit that statement, issue a separate report, and part of that, the asset and the liability balance from ECAF is recorded in our trust and agency fund. Going forward, GASB is telling us that they are going to require this to be part of our basic financial statements, which could mean it has to be on the accrual basis. So there's a change coming with what we have to do with extra classroom activity funds. We're waiting for a little additional guidance at this point to see exactly what that is going to involve, but we just wanted the board to be aware that this is coming down the pike potentially for next year's audit. The next slide, this is in play. The Yellow Book consideration and the independent standards is in play for the current audit. So as you know, as a governmental entity, requires us to perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards. As part of our audit, we perform for the district certain activities that are considered non-attest services. Yeah, this is the, I'm sorry, this is the slide right there. So for example, we are preparing your financial statements for you. That is a non-attest service. So in order to perform that, someone at the district has to have the skills, knowledge, and experience to responsibly oversee our performance of those services. So Charlene and Dan and whoever is reviewing the financial statements needs to be able to look at that and ask questions to make sure, because again, these are your financial statements, to make sure you ask questions and be able to take responsibility for those financial statements as if you prepared them yourselves. So as part of the audit, we document who is the person who's going to be responsible and what skills, knowledge, and experience they have in order to perform these services. And that allows us to maintain our independence and issue you an independent auditor's report. The next slide is our Office of State Controller hot button items. Based upon what we've seen so far this year, OSC is focusing on financial management, which includes budgeting, reserves, and oversight, information technology, food services, purchasing, fuel monitoring, staff attendance, leave accruals and separation payments, and extra classroom activities, principally because of what we discussed earlier with the potential change and how we're going to have to account for that. COVID-19 and the impact on the audit. As we mentioned before, the audit fieldwork, which is typically done on site, was done remotely this year. So that, that required the additional exchange of information over a secure portal. What was the audit impact of that? It required us to consider your processes and controls during the pause. So, did your controls continue to operate as they had prior to COVID? Did we have to institute any new controls during the pause period in order to make sure that our authorization and recording and approval processes were still in place? The next, before we, the going concern, subsequent event contingency considerations. I know Charles talked with, Dan, I believe it was you and one other individual about, going concern. So COVID has this impact on all organizations. For the school district, since COVID happened during the year, during our audit period, it's not a subsequent event, but it's a contingency, which means it has an impact on us. We're not exactly sure what the ultimate outcome of COVID will have on the school district. There will be a contingency disclosure in the notes of the financial statements, but it could impact whether we're able to continue as a going concern. Now, at the district, as everyone's well aware, due to the financial difficulties and our trouble passing the budget, we have other items that are impacting whether the district is going to be able to consider as a going concern. So what's going to happen most likely this year in the audit report is there will be a paragraph that references that we do have a going concern consideration, and that paragraph will reference to a note in the financial statements that I know Charles discussed yesterday. I'm going to ask, and Dan, you and I can talk. I'll let you guys kind of draft the wording that you would like to appear in the notes of the financial statements to describe what's happening and what the district's plans are to alleviate that going concern issue. Now, I know one of the items you've been discussing more diligently is the possibility of merging Fort Edward with South Glens Falls. I probably would look to emphasize that if that was possible, because that would tell the financial statement reader that although Fort Edward may not continue as an independent district, it is going to continue on by merging in with South Glens Falls. If that's not going to happen, we need to describe what the other plans are. The one thing we don't want to have, because if it's a true going concern opinion, essentially what that says to the financial statement reader is that the district is not going to be able to be a viable entity for a period of 1 year from the date of the audit report. So let's say that's October 19th. And in essence, what we're doing is we're disclaiming an opinion at that point. We're not even issuing an opinion on the financial statements. But if we can say, yes, there's a going concern issue, but management has plans, here's what the plans are, and that alleviates the going concern issue, then all it is an emphasis of a matter with a disclosure in the notes of the financial statements. So as we're wrapping up and drafting the report, Dan, I'm probably going to be involved with you a little bit just to make sure we get the wording exactly the way you want it to read.
Sounds good. Tom, can you briefly you say the reader, what types of entities are interested in our audit reports? Just for the public and for the board members here, who are the people that read this and make decisions based on this audit report?
So in addition to yourselves, OSC is going to look at the report. Any with debt, okay, any organizations that you have debt on your financial statements to, those organizations who we owe money to are going to be interested in the financial statements of the district. Funding sources. Obviously, that's the state of, the state of New York, but also federal organizations, especially those that the monies that's subject to the Single Audit Act. They're going to want to make sure that the district has the capability of using those federal funds in accordance with the compliance requirements, rules, and regulations that are required. So they're going to have an interest in the financial statements. So I would say, and obviously the voters of the district, will have an interest in the district financial statements. But in addition to the vote, so principally it'll be, the voters, yourselves, anyone that we owe, that we're obligated to for debt, and any type of federal and state funding sources will have an interest in these financial statements, and their interest will be heightened, if they see that there is potential that the district may not continue.
I'm just going to add one more. So anybody who we are looking to borrow money from, for example, if we lease vehicles or things of that nature for the school district, those creditors are going to be looking at our audited financial statements before making decisions on whether or not to approve applications for credit for those purposes as well. Does that sound like a true statement to you, Tom?
Okay, absolutely correct. So, I was talking, when I say debtors, and you're right, I was talking about it more from the existing debt that's on the district financial statements. But obviously, if the district wanted to finance anything via lease or any other type of loan instrument, those financing sources, potential sources, will look at the district financial statements simply to make sure of credit worthiness and the ability to repay.
Thank you.
That's really all that I had. I'm a little bit of a hands-on person, so like I said, Charles and I have been working together this week on any questions he had and observations that I have made. If you guys have questions at all, don't hesitate to email me or pick up the phone. My contact information is 2 pages forward in the slide deck. I have no problem answering a phone call or any questions that you might have, especially if after we're done with this presentation, if you just said, hey, I wished I had asked him a question, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me.
Any questions from anybody, any of the board members here in the room at Mallard Road? I just wanted to say, recognize, I guess is a better word, recognize Charlene Petro-Durgan's work with the audit, as well as Norma Lemica from her office, and certainly Michelle Sherwood from the Fort Edward in-person business office. Quite a bit of work, and I know they've been going back and forth with both you, Tom, and certainly in the last week with the field work, a ton with you, Charles. So I bet that you guys would probably echo those comments. They've done a great job getting you what you asked for. So I wanted to make sure I recognize them tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dan, and thank you very much, and we appreciate your effort too. We realize the audit is a long process, and it disrupts the normal functioning of the district for an extended period of time. So we do appreciate the effort of the individuals that you just mentioned, and we'll be working hard, over the next week or so to make sure we have drafts to you by that timeline that we discussed, to give you time to look it over and ask any additional questions that you might have.
Good on. Looks like we're good on our end, Tom and Charles. I want to thank you for folks out there in the public realm. I did hit record. I hit it after I did my introductory portions. I apologize, but we'll get the meeting posted up to the web for folks as soon as we can. But that being said, I think does that conclude the Finance Committee meeting for this evening?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes.
Anybody who's coming back on a little bit later, the 6:30 is the meeting time for the special board meeting. That's on a different link, and that's also found on our website, and that's a little bit different program. It's a WebEx, but it works the same way. But just wanted to make sure people know that link is also on our school website. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm gonna stop the recording, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Take care.
You too.